Hey guys, hi, welcome back once again, and this time I wish to talk about projections. So, projections not only of the image that we wish to project, but that we also do project before the world of ourselves and about ourselves. And when we do project a certain image of ourselves, and we do portray a certain image of ourselves before the world, we also project our feelings, our emotions, our thoughts onto the world that we interact with. And since we are social creatures, we are constantly exchanging information, feelings, thoughts, emotions with each other, which also means that this play and interplay of interaction, of information, is not just a one-way process, which also means that as much as we are impacting and influencing the world is also impacting and influencing us, which also means that we are constantly regulating and co-regulating each other. And I would like to take up my personal example to elaborate this a little further. So just a few days back, I had gone for my daughter's blood test because she had been having a certain kind of pain over here, which was persistently there for the past few weeks. And we needed to get her RBC, her WBC and her eosinophil counts done. And after having consulted a doctor, we came to know that that was exactly what needed to be done. So we went to this particular clinic, and before I dive in with this conversation, I would like to mention over here that I'm one person who's really scared of needles. The sight of needles, the thought of being pricked scares me. And I would get into that later. But as soon as my daughter goes in, I involuntarily, unconsciously speak out to this attendant who was to draw her blood sample that please be a little gentle, please be a little careful. And the attendant smiles at me, laughs at me, and my daughter raises her eyebrows and rolls her eyes. And this attendant tells me that, ma'am, don't worry, we'll be careful, we'll be gentle, and nothing will happen to your child. My daughter tells me, Ma, I'm absolutely okay. I will be okay. You please go out. Do not project your anxieties onto me. And I should mention here that I was a little embarrassed hearing that from my daughter, but I think that I'd equally embarrassed my daughter in front of everybody when I had said that. And we were kind of reflecting each other at that point in time. So I go out and I dive into what my daughter had just said. And it becomes essential for me to understand that and to comprehend that for myself when I come back home. It becomes essential for me to understand that my daughter was able to handle her own stuff, and that I was the one who was not able to deal with it. That I was the one who was anxious and was involuntarily, unconsciously projecting my own anxieties onto her. And therefore it became important for me to come back home and to understand where that had originated from. Where did that come from? What was the source of that? And once I started to journal, I realized that it had happened a very long time back. Probably 39 to 40 years back, when my little brother, who's a year and a half younger to me, was getting injected, and when he was getting vaccinated, and when the doctor had pulled his pants down and given him the shot, my brother had cried. And I can still hear that cry after almost 42 years. But I went back to that time to understand that the fear of the needle came from that place. Because when I heard my brother cry, I realized that it did hurt, that it hurts pretty bad. Also, at the same time, I was very angered at the grown-ups who were trying to inject my brother, who were trying to hurt my brother. Now, as a 3-year-old, I did not understand that they were injecting him for his own good. They were giving him a medicine. As a 3-year-old, I was not able to understand that. But the fear first registered in me, the anxiety first registered in me, and after that, over a period in time, I started to understand, or somewhere and analyze for myself, that this was essential, that these were the requisites. But somewhere the anxiety had not left the body. Also, at the same time, when this was happening, when my brother was getting vaccinated, there was this sense of helplessness that had come in me, because I felt helpless as an elder sister who was not able to help the little brother. And that somewhere also had a residual impact that also stayed. And when we went to this clinic, all of that came forward. And it only came to my understanding when I started journaling about it, when I started to write it in my own words, for me to be able to hear it, to understand it for my own self. And I think most of the times we kind of project our own projections, our own emotions, or our own feelings, our own insecurities, even securities, onto somebody else. And I think it comes from a place wherein we are trying to adjust to fit into a certain mold, into a certain construct, wherein a part of us has to be discarded so that we feel belonged. Because since we are co-regulating our environment, and we are getting co-regulated through our environment and with our environment, it becomes essential for us to feel belonged. And therefore, at times, we start shunning out, we start dimming out, we start abandoning, and we start divorcing a part of ourselves that doesn't feel welcomed. So let's take up another example here. Let's take up an example of a person who is really sensitive, of a kid who's really sensitive, or a kid who's really inquisitive. And when this kid is constantly told, as the kid is growing up, or as this person is growing up, that you're too sensitive, you need not be so sensitive, that you need not be so fragile, that you need not be so vulnerable, the person starts to shut themselves up, the person starts to close. And that becomes a survival mechanism, that becomes a part of the personality that is adjusting to the personal reality of that person at that point in time. And that keeps getting imprinted on us, and most of the times we start shunning it down, we start pushing it aside, because it feels uncomfortable, because it doesn't feel welcomed on the larger whole. And we kind of neglect it, which also means that we neglect our own selves, which also means that we abandon our own selves, we divorce our own selves to feel belonged. So let's take this example of another child who is very inquisitive, who always comes up with a why for everything. Say the grown-ups tell this, the society tells this kid, you should do this, you need to do this, you ought to be doing this, and the kid says, why? Why? And the kid is told, do not come up with a lot of whys all the time. And the kid still goes, why? Till the kid reaches a certain point, till the person reaches a certain point in time wherein they start to understand that all the whys are not welcoming, and that it needs to shut down, that it needs to push that part of it aside. And in the same breath, we also need to understand that when this child, or when this person is constantly asking a lot of whys, the person is also trying to have an engagement, a conversation in the present time. The person is trying to find a connect with the other. The person is trying to find its own self in keeping with the other. The person is trying to find its own engagement with the other. And when that doesn't happen, this person who was asking a lot of why, who was very sensitive, starts shutting down, starts numbing its own self down. And maybe COVID has given us an opportunity to start hearing our own voices, to start hearing and listening to our own selves. And maybe we can do it through having conversations, by having conversations that make meaning for us, that really help us connect. And if that's not happening, at least we can find a connect with our own selves. We can find our authentic selves. We can go back to the place where we had discarded our own selves to develop a personality that matched with the personal reality at a certain point in time. And that we can go back to this place and start owning that part of ourselves that we had divorced a long time back. And maybe we can start journaling. We can start talking to our own selves, listening to our own selves, trying to find that company in our own selves, so that we are able to regulate our own selves better, so that we are able to become more whole, so that we are able to connect with our own selves better. Because once we start owning ourselves better, because once we start connecting with our own selves better, because once we start listening to our own selves better, we'll be able to connect, we'll be able to listen and regulate the others in a better way. We'll start belonging to ourselves and to others in a better way. So let's try and make use of this opportunity which has been given to us. And I will see you once again next week. Till then, take care.